Hi, welcome to another edition of This Issue. My guest this time is Kay Mann from Brunswick. Kay, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Glad to have you here. Tell us a bit about yourself to start.
Well, I live in Brunswick. I've been in this area about 18 years now, after moving back from being away, and I have family roots in the area, particularly on Bailey Island, and so I really like it here.
All right. You started a website called Green Energy Maine. Tell us about that and why you started it, why you created it, and what your concern was to inspire you to do that.
Well, I would say the beginnings of it, the first gestation of the idea for it probably came in the year that we invaded Iraq. And I thought at that time, my impression of that action by our government was that it had to do with oil. And I was worried that future generations wouldn't enjoy the same quality of life that we did if we didn't do something about our energy sources. And so I slowly, over the years, formed the idea to build a website, which is a clearinghouse of information that can be found all in one place and one website about clean energy options and sources and resources for the state of Maine. People ask me why I didn't do something that was a nationwide focus, and I just thought, well, Maine is the size of a place I can get my arms around, and there's a lot of people doing a lot of great things here. So I built this website, www.greenenergymaine.com, which has a sort of aggregation of news articles from around the state that have to do with clean energy. It has blogs on 18 different topics related to clean energy that I've broken out. It has job listings, job postings, educational opportunities, a directory of providers of the goods and services that are related to clean energy. So it amounts to being sort of like the yellow pages of clean energy for the state of Maine online. And I put out a monthly newsletter. So it comes out on the full moon. It's called The News from Maine's Energy Frontier. So that was my way of sort of putting it at the feet of people, everything I can go and scout out and find, and bring it to people where they can find it in one site.
How long have you been doing this?
I've been doing it really since about 2011 is when the launch of the website took place, April of 2011.
Can you give a couple examples of some of the kind of alternative energy that you're promoting on that site?
Well, there's a lot, and just everything I find that I think is sustainable and applicable in the state of Maine, and that we can implement here is what I include. So, community solar is one kind of really new, exciting energy technology that is out there and going on.
You said community solar.
Community solar.
What does that mean?
That means that more than one household or business can benefit from the solar power gained from panels that are on one roof. In fact, our law permits up to 10 meters to share the power and the benefits of it from any given solar system. So if it's built to a large enough scale, great, up to 10 meters, including the host site, can share the power from that. So I think it's really cool, and it's an idea that's really taken off, I think, slowly. It's still just getting off the ground right now. But there are two installations right now. One is already built, and one is about to be built in Maine.
All right. How do you think the job prospects would be impacted across Maine if we really went with renewable energy?
Well, the job prospects in Maine are already being impacted significantly by the build-out of some land-based wind power installations. And I know it's a controversial subject, but it does create jobs. You can't really argue with those numbers. And we have a lot more potential to create many more jobs in the renewable energy field through just everything from the engineering and the site analysis, the nature studies that have to be done before renewable energy systems can be built, the communications about it all, the public education and outreach. There's the entire spectrum of occupations in our economy pretty much can be included in the renewable energy sector. University of Maine at Orono is doing great work to advance the prospect of offshore wind development and other ocean energy technologies. And so that's a real one to keep your eye on, I think.
Now, there was a Norwegian company, I believe, that was wanting to get involved with offshore wind. They say that the Gulf of Maine has more wind than any other place in the United States, correct?
That's right.
What happened to that whole project? Because Norwegians pulled out, last I heard.
Yeah, they were called Statoil. The company was called Statoil. It's an energy giant company. They are in many fields of energy, including renewables, and they were all set to invest a great deal of money, I can't tell you how much off the top of my head, but in the development and build out of offshore wind in Maine. And I think they were kind of told to go packing by our governor because the economic benefits were seen as being ones that would be leaving with it, with staying with the company and going off to Norway, rather than they were being seen as a competitor for University of Maine in its whole plan and program and research and development efforts. So whether that's true or not, they're gone. I think they may have been invited to leave right around the time that conversations were beginning to happen with University of Maine and Statoil as to how they could collaborate. I'm not really sure.
And I had heard from a good, as they say, a reliable source that Bath Iron Works was actually very interested in that project because they were looking to maybe be one of the local builders of some of these turbines that would have been used offshore.
That's true. It offers companies like Bath Iron Works the opportunity for diversification of their product line, which is a way for any business to strengthen its business. So rather than putting all your eggs in the warship basket, they could have had some eggs in the offshore wind basket. And offshore wind needs a base on shore for operations and maintenance. Boats go back and forth. It could have been located in Bath or some other, optimal places on the coast. It hadn't been determined yet, as far as I know. Yeah. But it was an opportunity. It still remains one. It still could happen.
Yeah. Well, the wind is still there, isn't it?
The wind is still blowing, and Angus likes to call us the Saudi Arabia of wind.
Yeah. Well, just in recent days, we're taping this in mid-February, and we had massive winds in these recent days. Just thinking how that could be turning some wind turbines big time, creating a lot of literally free energy out there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's obvious that we must move quickly to create renewable energy, but where will the kind of investment, where's the money going to come from to do this on a grand scale that we need to really impact our present situation?
Well, I can't tell you for sure because I don't have a crystal ball, but I would love to see a mixture of public and private money going into this. There is a sound case for strong return on investment for the private sector that chooses to invest in renewables. The public sector is already making some modest investments in renewable energy. Some technologies are being favored over others. I'd love to see a lot more go into it. The National Renewable Energy Lab has got all kinds of research and case studies that are being produced that are showing sort of which technologies are more viable than others. And it would be pretty easy, I think, for the policymakers who are deciding where the money will be invested to be informed by their research and make wise choices based on that.
Everybody's talking about the severe weather we're having these days, not just in Maine, but really all over the world.
Yeah.
Do you see any connection between these weather fluctuations and climate change?
I do. Without being able to tell you scientifically, I'm not a climate scientist, but I certainly see a coincidence of strange and unusual weather patterns with the climate change and the growing temperature of our globe from the carbon influx into the atmosphere and other emissions coming into our atmosphere. So I think there's a strong correlation, and I tend to go with what the scientists are telling us.
And do you know which U.S. government agency has the largest carbon boot print on the planet?
No, I do not. I bet you could tell me.
Actually, it's the Pentagon. It's the
Really?
U.S. Pentagon, the war system. And you can just imagine how much we impact the whole environment with wars and the expenditure of massive amounts of fossil fuels and everything else doing our wars.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that a lot of the renewable energy technologies are also being applied by the Pentagon too, because they can see the benefit of them economically and certainly from a resilience standpoint. You want to not have all of your resources coming from one place, from one technology, because you are vulnerable if that technology is attacked, right? And so you need to have other tools in your toolkit. And so as broadly diverse as the Pentagon can make their energy sources, the stronger they are, and the same may be applied to us as members of any community. So.
And how do you respond to people that say climate change is not real? And do you ever come across anybody that actually says that?
Personally, no, that's not the company of people I generally keep, but I know there are people out there who are denying that there is climate change. I've watched enough documentaries to convince me that it's happening, and by scientists who I find to be respectable. So I think I'd just as soon leave the argument about whether it's happening or not aside, because I find that there's a really strong economic argument for investing in renewable energy and the resilience that it can bring us and the jobs that it can bring us without even spending time and energy and breath on whether the climate is changing or not. So,
for you, just speaking personally, what would you say are the 2 or 3 top reasons that you believe, that you're convinced that climate change is real? What are the arguments, so to speak?
Oh, there's the whole business about disappearing ice in the Arctic, certainly, and I've seen a documentary that shows very clearly, year over year, the sad disappearance of the ice caps. And what worries me the most is about how when the ice is gone, the reflective power of the color white is gone too. And the oceans, being a darker color, are now absorbing solar heat where the ice was reflecting it away. And so I think that factor is accelerating the damage done by climate change, by carbon influx into the atmosphere. So.
Now, I think I've read that as the ocean heats up as a result of this, that Maine will be impacted because lobsters begin to move to colder waters further north, correct? Is that true?
That's my understanding. And then the other impact on the ocean and the lobstering industry will be ocean acidification, which affects any animal or creature with a carbon in its shell. It's going to dissolve the carbon of shellfish. And so our lobster population, which is a big staple of Maine's economy, may be severely impacted, and that worries me. Along with, of course, the ocean level rise that could happen along our shorelines. So, given the high real estate value of coastal Maine property, that's a big economic impact if all those properties just suddenly are swallowed up.
So then, looking at all this together, then how does both the problem and the solution that you offer in terms of alternative energy resources, how does all this ultimately affect the Maine economy?
Well, right now we're sending 80% of every energy dollar out of our economy. And so if we're spending $5 billion a year on energy, $4 billion is leaving our state. And that's a hemorrhage to our economy because dollars are the lifeblood of an economy. So we're sending that money outside of Maine for people outside of Maine to profit from and do with whatever they like. But imagine if we could keep $4 billion more in our economy and let it circulate 6 times the way local money does. What would be the impacts? Just imagine if it were going into tourism. If our tourism just got a $4 billion shot in the arm, how would that look?
And so you would suggest then, you seem to be implying that a big development of alternative energy would impact Maine's economy in a positive way.
It would, certainly.
Can you give 2 or 3 more examples of that?
Oh, well, we already have hydropower going pretty strong in Maine. It's owned largely by companies that are outside of Maine at this point, but there are some smaller hydro installations that are owned locally. If we could get more local ownership of smaller installations of power generating facilities, that would create local jobs and keep profits in our state's economy. We have the Ocean Renewable Power Company of Portland doing great things out in Eastport, harnessing Maine's tides, which we have the first tidal system in the nation connected to the grid in Eastport and producing power. They've now launched, I believe by now, their second pilot generation apparatus, which is floating on pontoons and suspended below pontoons, floating in the Cobscook Bay, as opposed to the first one, which was sitting on the ocean floor and spinning like a hamster cage just above the ocean floor.
So the tides essentially move the turbines. Is that basically the way it works?
Yes, the power of the tide is something like 80 locomotive trains, each tide going this way and then going that way. And so these turn this way and they turn that way as the tide moves, and it's a huge power resource that can be harnessed. And that company has done a very good job of hiring people locally to do all of their work needed to make these systems come to life and produce power for our grid.
So is it right now a problem of technology, that this isn't just taken off like crazy, or is it a problem of investment?
I think both. That this company has been very wise, I think, about scaling up their technology at a very sane pace and being very methodical about testing their technologies and making sure that it's working well. They got a grant to study their own efficiency and figure out ways that they can improve upon their technology and make it more efficient, and before scaling up any further. So I think they're really doing a good job.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've heard that with climate change, different parts of the country will see different effects. Like out west, we hear a lot more about drought in California.
Yeah.
A friend of mine lives in New Mexico, sent me an email the other day and said they haven't had rain in so long.
Yeah.
He asked me to send him some pictures of snow, just because,
Yeah.
they're just so dry out there. So I wonder if, some parts of the country are, in severe drought. What is the suggestion as to what Maine's future is going to be? Do you know?
I really don't know. As I said, I'm not a climate scientist. Anecdotally, it seems to me that we sure had a lot more snow this year than other years. We've had some rain events that were very strong and fast and hard rain, as opposed to general rain that comes in short increments and a little at a time. It seems like we're getting really dumped on in big storms. But I really can't say how that's going to happen. I've heard that the Gulf Stream is going to change its course, and the Gulf Stream very much affects the weather patterns along its length, including Maine. So it will bring us changes I don't think any of us can foresee, really. But it's all pretty worrisome because we're not really prepared.
Yeah. How would you grade our state government when it comes to dealing with this coming reality of climate change?
Maybe about a C minus. I mean, it's on the radar screen somewhere, but I wouldn't say we're seeing a lot of strong, forward-looking leadership to prepare us for the changes that are coming. There are some individuals who are working hard and trying to make some noise and get some attention and get some policies in place and maybe make some changes. But I think for the most part, they are a minority so far. And it's not the huge call to action that we need to see.
Do you have any sense of why the state is rather slow to deal with this?
I don't know. I imagine it has a lot to do with our governor being one of the people who kind of denies climate change is happening and seems to be working against some of the efforts to bring about both the, what do they say, the mitigation and the adaptation solutions that are needed to face climate change.
Speaking of the governor, Governor LePage has pushed the state to switch to natural gas, saying that it will provide cheaper access to, heat our homes and such and our businesses. Is this a real solution to our problems, laying natural gas pipes across the state?
I don't think it's a good long-term solution. I think it's a short-term solution which may affect limited areas of our population that happen to be along the existing pipelines. But for the majority of our state, the pipelines don't go where they are. The other difficulty with natural gas is, of course, now a lot of people are screaming about we need more pipeline capacity to get more natural gas into Maine, because right now we've got a limited supply, which is always going to mean prices go up, right? The price is low now while demand is low, but if they wanted to build demand, they want to also build supply at the same time so that the price doesn't get out of kilter with demand and go way up. So there's a lot of difficulties with it, and I don't think it's a long-term solution. It's certainly not a solution in terms of climate change, because there's a lot of unregulated emissions that aren't really being looked at from the process of fracking to get the natural gas in the first place. And that's
it's a very polluting process too,
it is.
Right?
That's what I mean. And the pollution emitted from the fracking process is not regulated. And we don't see it here in Maine, so we don't have to think about it, right? It's happening, it's polluting water wells down in Pennsylvania and Ohio. Not our problem, right? Should we be concerned about the people down there that are having a lot of environmental impacts from this process? I don't think we should really take that gas into our state without being concerned about where it comes from and the impacts it has. I regard natural gas as being like a Trojan horse. Once we invite it in, it's going to open up and all kinds of bad things are going to jump out at us.
Now, earlier when we were talking about the governor's position on offshore wind, you said you thought one of the reasons why he opposed it was because it would pull money out of the state into these Norwegian companies. Well, isn't natural gas also pulling money out of the state into the hands of big corporations in other places? Couldn't you make that same argument there?
I would say so. I would say you could, definitely. Yeah. It's not, Maine has a couple of natural gas companies in it, but I believe they're all subsidiaries of larger companies.
Yeah.
Quite sure.
Yeah. All right. So we only have a few minutes left. This is a huge problem. And reaching the solution is both political and very expensive. The viewers watching this show, I imagine, are very frustrated hearing all of this, and they probably feel very powerless and in a way kind of just resigned that there isn't anything they can do about it. What would you say to them in this moment as you want to call people to move to some kind of action?
I would say don't lose hope, but just take the next right step and take small steps in a positive direction. We haven't even talked about efficiency at all. And efficiency is the gigantic elephant in this room, which is our easiest low-hanging fruit that we can work with.
What does that mean?
That means anything from turning off your lights in the room when you leave, to having your home weatherized, figure out how you can save money on your heating costs, perhaps converting your heating systems to ones that use less fuel or that use local fuels like pellets or geothermal, which uses electricity. You can convert your electricity supply from the grid to a green one. There are several options out there for green electric power. One of them, called Maine Green Power, comes entirely from Maine, so it's generated from biomass, hydropower, and tidal power here in Maine, and has a constraint on this, or stipulation, that it all has to come from Maine. So you're doing good investing in Maine's distributed generation.
What if you're low
infrastructure.
income and you can't afford some of these more expensive alternative energy fixes? What do you do then?
Well, there is help for people of low income. There's several programs. There's the Maine Housing Program, and there's the Green Seekers Program from the Sierra Club. Efficiency Maine has all kinds of grants and incentives. They have some constraints on their, well, qualifications. You have to be able to demonstrate a savings of so many percentage points on your energy costs in order to qualify for that funding. But there are ways out there, and I've listed them on my website, as many as I can find.
We have about a minute left. Why don't you make a very short wrap-up statement and remind people what the website is, too.
The website is www.greenenergymaine.com, and one of the biggest things you can do is improve your efficiency. Find out all you can by reading and researching online, or invite an energy auditor to your home, and they will give you an earful of education. So there's lots of help out there, lots of people who can give you the tools you need, and there are really a lot of small positive steps that individuals can make.
Well, Mann, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
For your good work.
Oh, thank
and
you.
Thank you for coming on the show and sharing this very, very important story.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for watching another edition of This Issue. Until next time, good luck to you all, and please get organized.